Hello there. So my name's Paul Stripp, and today we've got Bryan Mansell from Gazeal, and we're going to be discussing one of the most important changes to the housing market in the last 100 years. So, Bryan, what would you say that is?
Well, hi, Paul. Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? What's the biggest change to the housing market in the last 100 years? The fact is, people who sell a house or buy a house always say it's the most stressful thing or one of the most stressful things we do. Yet no one ever seems to do anything about it. And we just go into this period of moving, which is traditionally linked to something else going on in our lives, which sometimes could be equally stressful. And we've just got this double stress. And why do we have that? So I spent 35 years working, as you know, as an estate agent, and I decided to do something different. And I believe that what we've done as a business is offer people who are moving the best opportunity they've had in the last 100 years in moving houses, which is a guarantee of commitment from them and the other party in the house. So if it's a seller, you're committed, your buyer is equally committed to you. And basically, you both then go through the process together, which is quite complicated, without the threat of one of you just walking away at the last minute, which of course happens, as you know, to hundreds of thousands of people every year.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that there's so many fall-throughs in the UK industry?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to look at this. I mean, we all know over the last, since I can remember figures going back, the average is 30% of house transactions don't make it to the destination, which is, completion, as it's called, moving home. And that's obviously, not good for anybody involved. And not only is it not good for your mental health, it's not good for your bank balance because you'll have costs and charges to have to pay. And when you look at the number of people that move every year, and over the last 5-6 years, taking out the middle year of COVID with 2020, you're talking over 1 million people are moving in England, 500,000 in Scotland and Wales. So that's 2 people at least for every house transaction. So you're talking about nearly 3 million people, which is a lot. And it's the two things you look at are, first of all, there are physical reasons in terms of the actual property itself as to why you can't buy it. And that is about, lots of work, a bad survey, subsidence, which is the ground underneath collapsing, all these things, structural issues. And then there's the emotional side of it. And the emotional side, unfortunately, is the part that causes most sales to collapse, because people go into a house transaction, and they don't do it very often, quite unfamiliar with all the nuances and the changes that happen. If you're selling a house, what happens is you put your house on the market, someone like you finds them a buyer, and then you keep your fingers crossed for potentially 3 to 4 months that this is all going to happen and your life can continue, i.e. the reasons why you're moving. But you've got a 30% risk that it's not. And that's just way, way too high. And it's devastating for people and families, Yeah. But it's legal. It's the only thing you can buy in this country that you can agree to buy and walk away from 4 months later with never actually spending any money on.
Yeah.
It's mad, right? It's just mad.
It is mad. It's just allowed to cause so much stress and anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, doesn't it? You know that. You're an experienced guy. I've done it. I used to say to people that if you want to be an estate agent, you should first train to be a therapist. You know what I mean? Because you're actually having to keep people calm and on an even keel because of the fact that once you're in a house move, there's not an awful lot you can do to speed it up as a member of the public. You're relying on your estate agent and your solicitors and your mortgage brokers and all these things. It's really difficult to know what to do. So actually, you just get really frustrated if things aren't happening. And then people start making unreasonable demands of each other, thinking that that's threatening each other, trying to get things moving, which is just very negative for everybody.
Yeah. And that just escalates, isn't it? As soon as one party starts escalating and that somehow transfers to the other party, then it becomes completely there.
It does. And it is, the result is it's no good for anybody. All the reasons we know. And then some people, I've known people who have walked away from their dream property because they've had a bit of an emotional rant because they didn't get their own way. And then they come back, weeks later and said, we've made a terrible mistake. We want to buy this property. Well, I'm sorry, someone else is buying it now.
Yeah.
So you just had a moment of madness, thrown in the towel and walked away because you can.
Yeah.
And then you've massively regretted that.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yeah.
generally believe that people go about buying or selling a property on a whim, like we might buy something. You might be browsing in a shop and think, oh, I'll buy that. I wasn't planning to buy it. Or you're going around, the classic is mine. I go around a supermarket with specific things to get, and I come out with a whole lot of stuff I had no intention of buying. That kind of doesn't happen in house moves, right? So walking away from it because you can shouldn't be allowed, in my opinion.
Yeah, we had one fall through the other day because they just decided they didn't like the area anymore. Simple as that. Just a phone call on a Saturday morning. We're pulling out. We've decided we don't like the area.
Yeah,
and that's it.
And you can't get. And that's if someone has actually told you why they've done it, right?
Yeah.
I've had people that suddenly we just can't get hold of them. No response. They don't want to speak to us. Don't want to give us a reason. And we've now got to explain to someone selling a house who's packed up, ready to go, that we can't get hold of the buyer. We have assumed they're not buying. The lawyer has told us they're not buying. We know now they're not buying. But people need an answer, a reason, and they can't get that. And there's nothing they can do about it. And that's what I decided to try and change.
Yeah.
With like-minded people like you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the fantastic things about Gazeal as well, because we had very similar about 2 years ago. Buyer pulled out, no reason given. Then they tried to claim it was a survey. We then demonstrated how wrong the survey was. Proved quotes, etc. They still wouldn't meet us on site or given us an opportunity. Yeah. They just used the survey to get out of it. But obviously, with Gazeal, you've got that in place to protect.
So we're not by any means, and we never would, trying to force people to buy and sell a house they don't want to, or they physically can't, for the reasons I explained before. I've recognised, as my colleagues at Gazeal do, that buying a house is a stressful, complicated process, and so, but there are major reasons why you can't buy a house, and if one of those major reasons presents itself through no fault of yours, then you shouldn't have to be worried about having to pay penalties or compensation. You should be still free to be able to walk away. But what we've done is we've created a process that gives the seller, and it starts with the seller, the opportunity to say to their buyer, look, we're serious about moving. We're committed to this. And we're going to put our money where our mouth is, right? We're going to say, look, we will not sell this to anybody else, and we will move. And if we decide not to, then we will recognize that decision is going to cause you some emotional and financial stress, and we'll cover that cost.
Yeah.
But in return, for me doing this as a seller, Mr. Buyer, or Mrs. Buyer, obviously, we would like you to match that commitment, to show us the same in return. And most people do. When they're presented with this, most people do, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a bit of certainty.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a way of not losing the property or not losing the buyer, being able to get the dates that they're planning to move on nailed down, but also knowing that if something happens that is through no fault of theirs, not their control, they're not going to be liable for anything else as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of the best of both worlds, really, for people.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Paul, the thing that the public never know is, and it's the thing that estate agents never tell people, is what we've already discussed, that actually 30% of the sales fall through. Now, of course, to get 30%, you're going to have people with 20 and people with 10 and people with 40 to get the average of 30. And in almost every town in the UK, there should be a league table of shame of estate agents that, no matter what bluster they come up with about why you should list with me, they should be completely transparent and say, here's all of our stats. This is how fast we move people on average. This is how many times sales fall through with us. And this is what we're doing about it. And that's why people like you should be the obvious choice to local people, because you are saying we're doing something about it because we recognize there's a problem and it needs to be solved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just reduce that stress to yourself?
Yeah.
Because that is the reality at any given moment, that it can just it can all just be taken from underneath you, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
No, I long, as an agent, and as you know, your viewers may not know and probably won't care, but I ran a couple of the largest agency groups in the UK, and I was privileged to do so. But what I learned an awful lot of things from that experience, mainly that, when you are trying to move home for the reasons that, you have to move home, which are, normally major, and in some cases negative, and in other cases positive. That we talk about the 3 Ds: death, divorce, and debt, which unfortunately keep the housing market alive, which I'm sorry to say is true. That's traumatic. A family is going through a very traumatic experience.
Yeah.
The move that is a necessity shouldn't be as bad as it is.
Yeah.
And I just saw this on a massive scale, in the larger positions I was in, and it's devastating for people. And so I looked for a solution as an estate agent, and there wasn't anything out there other than, use a property auction. But I didn't want to do that because it potentially means I don't get a great price for my home. So that's what inspired me to try and do something, to create something that can actually help the public, and by nature of that, help estate agents and help the lawyers involved and the mortgage brokers and all the people involved get to benefit. But the choice, people go into moving home oblivious to the dangers and the risks because estate agents don't tell them.
Yeah. It's almost like people don't want to hear it as well.
Yeah.
It's like almost.
It won't happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The crazy thing is, right, everybody insures their car, but nobody ever expects to get in their car and crash. They always say it's other people. And I've got car insurance, because in case I have an accident. But you don't ever get in your car planning to have an accident, right? So, but you're going to move home, which is hundreds of times the value of your car and the biggest journey most people make in their lives, yet they do it without covering their backs.
Yeah. And also it's the speed with which people will rush into getting the house on the market without getting any of the paperwork ready. So that it's literally want to sell, estate agent turns up, takes the photos, throws it on Rightmove, sticks a board up, and then it'll go under offer, and then it will collapse a few weeks down the line because they haven't got the right information. Whereas, as you say, if you're buying a car, you make sure you get all your paperwork correct, everything's in place before you can take it off the forecourt.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good analogy. You imagine walking into a car dealership and you were interested in a vehicle, and they didn't bother checking you had a driving license to take you out on a test drive, and you didn't bother asking for any paperwork or any proof of ownership or anything else, what's under the bonnet, what's the service history, and you just bought the car. You wouldn't do that. But you do that on a house. Yeah. Makes no sense. Did you know, right, that England and Wales, when I say that, and Great Britain, is the 42nd hardest country to buy a house in the world?
No, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
And it's the slowest. South Africa is close by, but it's the slowest. If you put your house on the market today, you can, if you look at the averages of the country, you would expect to find somewhere else and get your keys for your new house and give the keys onto your old house no quicker than about 6.5 months. And the only time in that entire half-year period that you know for sure it's going to happen is 10 days before you actually do. It's just mad, right? Why do we do it?
Yeah.
So you can use something like, you can use and you can, and if you're selling your house, it doesn't cost you anything to use Gazeal, and you can work with people like us through only the best agencies like you, and you'll be better off. Or you can not, and you'll just be no worse off than you are right now. But when you look at the housing market today and you listen to what we've said and you get the truth about the risks attached to going on the market, if every agent told the truth, maybe half the people wouldn't actually move because they'd be too frightened to, but who knows? But if you actually had the truth about your local market and what was happening, how many transactions fail, how long it takes, because those stats are available they are two missing components for all the other stats that people use to make their decision about which agent to go with. You need the complete picture before you make a decision on who you're going to trust your greatest asset to, who's going to look after you for the next 6 months and make that process of your next move as painless as possible.
Yeah. Why do you think it's gone on for this long? You know, the way I know I said the UK market earlier on, but why do you think it's gone on for this long? The way we've been doing it.
The way that we do it. Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to it, to be honest. Because obviously our cousins north of the border have a very different system that has a fraction of the failure rate that we have south of the border. You know, the moving process in Scotland is one of the best in the world, in my opinion. And you know, ironically, you know, the moving system in England is probably the worst in the world, or one of the worst in the world, the most traumatic. Why we have it will go back centuries as to why we have it. You know, why the process is it. You know, freedom of choice. If I've agreed to buy your house, made you an offer, I should still be free to withdraw and keep my options open. Well, that's okay. And you should, in a way, but not if you expect the seller of the property to take their house off the market for you. That is an unfair process that is not built on trust.
Yeah.
Why it is, I don't know. I'm sure I might even try and look it up after this, but I've never been interested in why. I've been interested in what we should do about it and how we solve the problem and how we, at the very least, how do we make it fair and balanced between both of the people involved? Yeah. Because we've talked about buyers today, but actually there's as many buyers that agree to buy someone's house and keep their fingers crossed that they don't get gazumped, or that seller doesn't decide to go, I'm not selling it now. Yeah. Especially from a tenant, from a buyer's point of view, who is a tenant. And this is another big problem. You know, you're in a rented property, which a lot of people are in, and there's nothing wrong with that, but their choice is to now come out and buy somewhere. Well, of course, they've got the added difficulty of agreeing to buy your house and giving notice. Yeah. And praying to God that the notice that I give, which is normally 2 months, I'm not going to be homeless. If I give my notice on a rental property before I've legally exchanged on my purchase, which I'll probably have to do, then, and imagine, and I've had this happen to people, I've seen people do it, and they've had notice, and the landlord's lined up a new tenant, and then the seller of the property has walked away. I'm now actually in a position where I'm going to be homeless in 2 weeks' time. I mean, wow, that is incredible stress. Yeah, we've got one at the moment. You know, the buyer's in Airbnb. She was in rented, went into short-term rented, and now she's had to go into a B&B. And you know, we should have exchanged this week, but we're just being absolutely led up the garden path by solicitors at the last minute. Yeah, they won't be the first one, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, it's just so frustrating. But I think with Gazeal, obviously, so it's getting that information at the outset before it goes to market. So how does that help buyers and the sellers sell the property quicker or safer? Yeah. So look, if you're going to move in England and Wales, your conveyancer that you choose to move through will follow the Law Society's protocol. And that is the mandated process of moving home. To do that as a seller, you would have to complete a significant number of forms and declare an awful lot of information to your solicitor in preparation for them to send a contract to the buyer, for the buyer's solicitor to then review and ask questions. And the transaction is about getting information from either the other source or third parties to put together this contract to say, we're happy with it. So from the seller's point of view, you've got a choice. If you want to move, you don't have a choice, by the way, in terms of the paperwork you've got to do, but you get to choose when you do it. And so I would consider this. What's better for you? Is it better for you to do nothing, wait till you find a buyer, then suddenly have to scramble around instructing solicitors, mortgage companies, all the other things, get all these forms done, which are 30 odd pages that you've never done before, unless you've sold a house, but that would have been years ago, and you don't know all the answers to, and it requires you to get a whole lot of paperwork. Do you want to do all that in a mad rush, which is going to slow your sale down, or do you want to get that prepared earlier, which is actually the right thing to do? And it's a process called becoming sale ready. And there's a guide that your viewers, if they're thinking of selling at some point or buying, should definitely look at, which is a how to sell and how to buy guide, which are free guides, can be downloaded from the internet.
Yeah.
And these guides basically advise, if you're selling a house, they advise you to be transparent up front. While people like yourself, the agents are getting all the beautiful marketing put together, all the photographs taken, that's going to take a couple of days. So use that time wisely to dig out your paperwork, get yourself ready. The problem is people don't know what to get or what to do. So working with you, of course, and with us by default, they will be guided through what they need to do step by step from the first day they come on the market. Have this information, ready. They give it to you. And then you've got someone that's viewed their property that says, hey, Paul, we quite like this. What do you reckon they're going to take on an offer? What you're then doing is saying, look, before you make an offer, the seller has prepared some information for you, material stuff that you're going to need to see, and you will see, but not for weeks yet in the sale. Do you want to have a look at this now? Completely free of charge. Have a look at it now, and then make your offer.
Yeah.
Now, overwhelmingly, the public are keen to do that if they're interested in the house. If they're not interested, then they're not going to look at it. But most of them, if they're interested, are. And they're then given information that you're passing on from the seller that actually, tells them about planning permissions and about the boiler and about work that they've had done and the utilities and how much does it cost. And, are my neighbors, okay? Or are they, I'll choose my words. Are they a bit dodgy? Who knows? Have there been complaints? Has there been any noise issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Stuff you're not going to find online. So the benefit to your seller is you've got to do this information. Your buyer's going to see it. Do you want them to see it before they agree to buy a house, or 6 weeks later when they get surprised by an answer you've given and then they walk away?
Yeah.
At that point, you're going to have costs with your solicitor. So getting it prepared earlier on, becoming sale ready, also means that you, as their agent, can look through this information and give your customers some really good advice on things they can do that will help them later on in the sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's free, right? No reason not to do it.
Yeah. If you get it done early, then, as you say, the buyer's going to make an informed decision about whether they want to proceed, whether they don't want to proceed. So you don't lose any marketing time or stress or going out there looking for a house to purchase yourself.
Absolutely.
So I think
these are all the things that give people a bit more certainty and a little bit more speed at the time where the buyer and seller have come together. The chain's ready. Everybody now wants to get to exchange. It's a sprint. You've got a head start.
Yeah.
So do you want to be leading out the front and get there quicker, or do you want to be waiting behind, faffing around, getting all your paperwork done that you haven't done for 20 years, and you're trying to dig around where your guarantees are and your insurances are, and where the hell are all these documents that you're going to need to provide? Do you want to do that at the time which everyone's trying to get you to exchange contracts? You don't want to be slowing things down at that point. So get prepared early, saves you time, and possibly saves you a bit of money as well.
Yeah, speed is key, isn't it?
Speed is key, absolutely.
Yeah. And also, I was talking to a potential vendor this week, and I was talking to them in regards to Gazeal, etc., and having a reservation agreement. And I said, the thing is, if you've got a reservation agreement, when you're going out there looking at properties, like, how is that vendor going to see you? They're going to see you as ultra committed, because everyone else is going to be, potentially, in a weaker position or not look as committed. Yeah. So it kind of helps all along the chain, isn't it?
It does, and it does for everybody thinking of buying a house. If you are able to show the person whose home you're thinking of buying that you are fully committed, and I say show and rather than tell, because everybody says, I'm a really good buyer. Well, of course you're going to say that. Hello. You're not going to say I'm a really bad one. So, but it's kind of like you've got the VIP sticker on your chest, whereas everybody else doesn't. And when it comes down to it, that could actually get you in, and we've seen it happen. It does get you picked over the rest of the crew. That could help you with negotiations as well.
Yeah.
Getting a better deal for yourself because you are showing you're valuable because you're committed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's worth its weight in gold, isn't it?
Yeah, right. That's exactly it. Certainty has a cost.
Yeah.
And it has a value. Sorry, certainty has a value to people. That value differs depending on the person and the person's circumstances, but it definitely has a value to everybody.
And so why do you think other agents, I don't want to use the term traditional, but, why do estate agents not put forward reservation agreements? Why do they not try and get their sellers to, to fill out the TA6, TA10 forms early, in your opinion, Brian?
So, I think it's fair to say that more people are now than ever before, certainly in my time in the industry, which is really great, but they're extremely slow to change and to help people. And it'll be a number of things, Paul. Firstly, a lack of understanding of the process properly. If you want to use the TA forms, you need a license with the Law Society, or you need to partner with a local firm of solicitors. And of course, if you're just using one solicitor, then that is only going to benefit those clients that want to use that solicitor.
Yeah.
And you're kind of taking away their freedom of choice. Obviously with you and us, people can use whoever they want. So, but the reason they don't do reservations is actually reservations themselves have been around for a long time, but traditionally at the top end of the market. And they've had to be drawn up by solicitors, and there's a big cost on that. And then there's got to be money lodged, and there's a cost on that. And a lot of the legal system now with their professional indemnity insurance don't let them do that anymore. Certainly look after the money, sizable chunks of money. So people have just gone, we can't do that then, and have been oblivious to innovations around them, such as us, that have recognised that, is it a really good thing to have two people committed in a house sale? Yeah. Well, then let's find a solution rather than just go, we can't do it.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the age-old problem that is not just unique to buying and selling houses, it's people are resistant to change. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's that is one of the things with this housing market, is people are just they're so stuck, in their ways, which is understandable. We've been doing it like this for decades.
Yeah. The biggest problem, though, I will say this out loud, and I know I'm being recorded, but the biggest problem that I see, and I had this in my days as an agent as well, is estate agents think about themselves. Well, we don't have a fall-through problem, so we don't need reservations. The point that they're missing is that they might not have a 30% fall-through rate. They will definitely have some, but think of the impact on their customers if they took away the threat of it.
Yeah.
The reality might not be as bad as it is for other people, i.e. I might only have 5% of my sales fall apart, whereas everybody else is 30%. Aren't we great? Let's carry on. We don't need to change. The issue is, I'm not thinking of my customer who is as nervous as hell, hasn't done this for 20 years, and would just love not to have to risk it at all.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the biggest problem at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it does just eliminate the anxiety, doesn't it?
But estate agents think they know what their customers want. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, Zoopla have proved this over the last 5 years. They do a State of the Nation report every January, which starts off with the top 10 things that the sellers have told us they're most interested in knowing. And then you rank that next to the estate agent's version, and they never match.
Yeah, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before we chatted, and I saw that one of your posts on Zoopla. The latest.
Yeah, I tell you, I will scour the internet, and I'm the sort of, I don't know. I'm constantly trying to find the truth and make sure people are educated on it. Because then, for me, that's the best. That's how I was brought up. Tell the truth, and you never forget what you've said, right? That's the big thing. Yeah. But when I find people writing articles that are not true or are bad advice, I will call them out on it.
Yeah.
Always. Because I am of a generation, maybe, that is fed up of the bullshit that we are all surrounded with on a daily basis. And it makes it impossible to know what the right thing to do is, because there's so much information. So actually, where there is the truth, that's the path I'm going to follow, and ask the people that are not doing that to back up the statements they make.
Yeah, yeah. It was a pretty bad article to go. I saw they actually apologised for it as well.
They did, yeah. And in fairness to them, they apologised, and that's great. because we don't all get it right, and if we admit our mistakes, that's how we learn.
Yeah, definitely. Bryan, I really appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much for that. And we'll speak soon.
Brilliant. Thanks for the invitation, Paul. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Bryan.